This TED Talk has 47 million views, and it's the sixth most watched TED Talk of all time. We're going to analyze how the speaker starts his talk.
What keeps us healthy and happy as we go through life?
He opens with a question right away, which is one of the best ways to get your audience engaged immediately.
If you were going to invest now in your future best self, where would you put your time and your energy? There was a recent survey of millennials, and over 80% said that a major life goal for them was to get rich. And another 50% of those same young adults said that another major life goal was to become famous.
He adds a follow-up question, then gives us some interesting stats. And these particular stats encourage us to reflect and think about how our answers would compare to the ones in the study.
And we're constantly told to lean into work, to push harder.
He's done a nice job with the pictures here, making the presentation more light and enjoyable. Pictures don't always have to be graphs, tables, and boring stuff. They can also be fun or even silly things, as long as they're relevant to your message. Overall, this was a very pleasant and engaging start to his talk. Lots of positive energy without being over the top.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cody Hand. I'm with the Speakers Collaborative, and welcome to another episode of the Studio Sessions with the Speakers Collaborative. I'm excited about today. We've got one of our resident experts, Ty, that's going to join us on stage right about now. Hey, Ty, how are you?
Hello, Cody. Good to see you. Doing excellent. How are you?
It is good to see you too. Thanks for joining us today. So, for those of you who aren't aware, Ty is one of our resident experts with the Speakers Collaborative. He meets with our groups on the regular basis to talk about the best ways to be a public communicator. Ty has a couple of shorts that we put on our channel for you all, and he produces some really top-notch content. So Ty, why don't you give us a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ty. I'm a communication coach. So I primarily help professionals and entrepreneurs to speak with more confidence, more charisma, more clarity, so that they can get more respect, gain more influence, become better leaders, and ultimately grow in their careers and their businesses. So I'm here in Toronto, Canada, but I really teach people from all around the world, which is a blessing. Very cool to be in a world now where we don't have to be limited by our locations. So no matter where you are listening to this, good to have you.
Thanks, Ty. So tell me one interesting fact about yourself.
One interesting fact. I'm a pretty boring guy overall, but I used to teach piano, actually. I used to teach piano to underprivileged kids. And I also had some kids that I taught that had a higher amount of privilege, so I did get paid for those ones. But I like to think about the piano or any other instrument kind of like the way that I think about our speaking voice. So imagine that your speaking voice is like an instrument. You can learn to play it very well, or you could use it a lot, but still play it pretty bad. So I help people to really play their instruments much better.
That is awesome. So do you yourself give speeches?
Sorry, could you say again?
Do you yourself give talks? Do you talk on stage yourself?
Yes, I do give talks, lots of different trainings. A lot of times they're for corporations or they're at conferences, that type of thing. So mainly in the professional setting. Sometimes I'll host different events depending on, who wants to have me up there and put on a little bit of a show. But yeah, I would say the speaking on a stage or whether it's speaking to a group, that's probably where I have the most fun by far.
That's awesome. How did you get your start in that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I am the least likely person that would be speaking in really any type of format. I grew up on a very small farm near a very small town. So when I was 8 years old, I remember in our yard on the farm, I started climbing the tallest tree that I could find. So it was a very large pine tree that was growing in the yard. And in that little farmyard, we were about 3 miles from the closest town, and the closest town had 800 people, which was probably 800 more people than I would have wanted. I was a very shy kid, very awkward. I loved avoiding people as much as possible. So I didn't even want to be around other humans, let alone talk to them. Now, the reason I liked climbing trees so much was because, well, the top of the tree to me seemed like the least likely place to run into someone and have a conversation with them. So, do you have any siblings, Cody? I'm curious.
I do. I have two.
Are you the older sibling? Are you the younger sibling?
Well, I'm a twin, but I call myself the middle because my youngest is 3 minutes younger than me.
Interesting. So you had both an older sibling and a younger sibling, so you're kind of the middle one.
That's correct.
Okay, so you might be able to relate to this. I was the younger sibling, so I had an older sister. And my older sister was actually the exact opposite of me. She loved to take control. She was very bubbly. She was an extrovert. And whenever I would get asked a question as a kid, my sister, her name is Alana, Alana would jump in and say, "Oh, this is what Ty thinks. Oh, let me tell you about Ty." So I actually loved it. I had no problems with this whatsoever. Take the spotlight, Alana. I'm happy to just hide behind the scenes in the background. Now, this kind of works when you're a kid, but this doesn't really work when you're an adult. So I remember when I first entered the professional world, the only job I could get was selling life insurance. Maybe not the best job for somebody that's a really shy introvert talking to people about death, disease, disability. But it was the only job I could get. As you can imagine, I didn't particularly interview well at the time. So it's the only job I could get, 100% commission. Sure, we'll give Ty a chance. And that's when I actually really learned how important communication was and how bad I was at it. So I tried Googling. I remember staying up late and just doing hours of research on, can I still get rich without having to talk to There's not a whole lot of results that came up. Maybe if you're like an Elon Musk tech genius, but for an average intellect type of person, yeah, it turns out you need to have some speaking skills. So at that point, then I really just became obsessed with speaking and everything to do with communication. This was a little over 10 years ago. And I really found that just obsessing over it, I spent all the spare time that I had learning, researching, reading, and then practicing, experimenting, trying it out in the real world. And it was such a clean correlation between, as my speaking skills increased, so did my career, my quality of life, my relationships, my social life, all the metrics that we like to measure, a lot of, general, our quality of life. And so I got to the point after many years where everything looked good on paper, good job, good relationship, everything was fantastic, except I didn't feel like I was really contributing or helping others the way that I wanted. And at that time, I didn't really have much other knowledge or many other skills other than now being a really good speaker from obsessing over it for so many years. So I did what now seems kind of silly, but I'm glad I did it. I just quit my job with really no business acumen in terms of how to start a coaching business. But I was like, I'm going to coach people on speaking because I've given trainings at work, I've given presentations at work that help people with this. So I thought that's enough, right? I know how to teach people this, but that's a lot different from actually getting people to pay you to do it on your own. So I probably went 6 to 7 months without getting a single client just because I grossly underestimated what it actually takes to start that type of business. Now, eventually, through a lot of coaching myself, getting other people to coach me on how to be better in that business, and here's how to get clients, here's how to help them, etc. Now it's at a point where I'm very fortunate to have helped hundreds of people, and everything worked out in the end. But there was a little point there where I was thinking, okay, my money's running out. Got a lot of debt here. do I go back to work? And fortunately I didn't. I stayed stuck with it, and thank goodness.
We are all very thankful for that. So tell me, Ty, I love that rundown, and growing up in a rural community, I am familiar with that as well. Not the luxury of Canada, but in eastern New Mexico. So tell me, if you were to define where you fit, what your niche is today, what would it be?
Man, the amount of times that I've went back and forth on this since having my business, it's an embarrassing amount of times, because you hear, niche down, but don't niche too far down. And then you niche down to a point where you think kind of the right spot. And then you're like, well, I'm now getting some of these clients, but they don't really fit into that. And it's really easy to get caught up in this. So right now, it's probably not as defined as it could be. Now, the average person that I help, they're in a leadership role. They're in a position where they're managing a team, or they're an executive, they're C-suite, they're VP, something like that. And they are responsible for whether it's speaking to other stakeholders, they're speaking to important clients, they're speaking to team members, and they just want to have the most impact that they can. And so for them, speaking very clear, very concise, very confident, speaking with that certain level of influence is very important to them. Now, the problem with the whole niching down thing is that I also have clients that are in tech, right? And they are engineers, or they are, software developers, they're analysts, and they're not in leadership roles, but they want to get to that point. And a lot of times people in tech who are very, very intelligent like that, they aren't natural extroverts a lot of times, so they need help. And then to make things even less specific, I also have a really good bucket of entrepreneur clients, people who want to do more like speaking on podcasts, speaking on stages, speaking on camera for their meetings or for content and that sort of thing. So I know it's not nearly as specific as it should be, but if you're one of those three groups listening, I'm very well equipped to help you.
Absolutely. I think that's great, Ty. Thank you so much for that. So, as you know, the Speakers Collaborative is an effort of mine to really provide a stage for people who want to be on stage, who have a story they want to tell. And that stage could be anything from being a keynote speaker to being an expert communicator that is really well thought of in small circles. And one thing that I really love to do is give people the stage. And as you know, we spend some time here on the studio sessions really giving you a platform to talk about your work and to spend some time really promoting Ty. So I'm going to go off camera for a minute, and for 5 minutes actually, and give you a chance, Ty, to really address our audience, not only our audience, but your audience as well, and tell them, speak from your heart and tell them what you want them to hear.
I appreciate that. That's a nice thing to do, Cody. So generous. I hope I can still see you, just because your face comforts me. Okay. This is an interesting question. There's many different directions I could take this, but the one that comes to mind first is I've had about 5 clients over the past week who have finished their one-on-one coaching programs. And there was a common theme that came up actually in each of the final exit interviews. So at the very end, we do a kind of a wrap-up session where we review where they started, where they are now, what they learned, the changes that they made, all that type of stuff. And this will apply no matter what your goal is with speaking, whether you just want to speak better at a dinner party with your friends, or you want to speak on a stage with 100,000 people. Now, what came up is that everyone said some version of, I learned some things about speaking that I didn't even know were possible to change. Okay. This is something that I think a lot of people have a misconception of, is that certain things are just fixed. So whether it's a personality trait, well, I'm just an introvert, or I'm just not very engaging to listen to, or I can't speak on those particular topics because I'm not skilled enough. No matter what it is, whether it's your voice, your words, your body language, everything can be fixed. Okay, I promise you, everything can be fixed. So, for example, one of my clients, he was a very established guy. People really respected him in his industry and in his line of work. But he felt that people didn't listen very closely to him when he'd speak for longer periods. He said that people thought that he was boring. This was his interpretation. People thought that he was boring. He said, well, I feel like people just don't really listen to me very well when I speak. And I think that I'm just not very engaging. And he said all of those things because he was absolutely right. He was boring to listen to. He did not have a good voice, and he was tough to pay attention to for longer than a couple minutes at a time. Now, a lot of people, they might think, well, that sucks. Yeah, I'm just not good at speaking and keeping people interested. You know, I'm very good at my job. I'm very skilled and very smart, but I'm not good at this. So there were multiple things that we did with him, but I'll touch on just a couple easy ones that anyone could do. So first, if we look at his voice, well, his voice was monotone. There wasn't a lot of variety in it. So if he's talking about a certain subject and he's just talking like this, if he's talking like this the whole time, you're probably going to get bored. Now, is a voice fixed like that forever? Absolutely not. So one of the things we worked on with his voice was just adding a little more emphasis to some of the words. So if he's saying this is something that's very important to listen to. This, we could emphasize just certain words so that there's a little more volume on certain things that he's saying. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the voice. So I emphasized first and I emphasized voice. Okay, that automatically makes whatever he was saying sounding a little more interesting. You can also add variety in terms of slowing down at certain times, and then getting a little bit faster, speaking a little more quickly at other times. So if you're slowing down during the parts that are more important, and then speeding up just a little bit as you're going through things that are maybe a bit less important, that all makes a person more engaging to listen to. You don't have to overcomplicate this. As long as there's some variety in the voice, it's naturally going to be more interesting. We love variety, okay? With the body language, we got to look at the nonverbal as well. He was very stone cold, just straight-faced. So really easy thing to do. We just got him to start smiling more when he was talking, right? He looks like he cares more about what he's saying and he's more enthusiastic about what he's saying just by smiling a bit more. Straight-faced, talking like this, you're actually giving your voice less emotion just by having a straight face. And if you add a smile, your voice will automatically sound like it has more emotion. More emotion, more interesting to listen to. So it might sound simple to hear now. You're like, yeah, change up the voice a little bit, smile a little bit more, did some other work with other parts of his body language, more hand gestures, stuff like that. But for a person that maybe doesn't think about this stuff or doesn't have the knowledge or hasn't analyzed it themselves, I meet so many people that think, yeah, it kind of sucks. Like, I'm frustrated. This is just how I am. And I wish I could change it, but I just don't think I can. Now, oh, there we go. Cody's back. I can see the face again. This just made my experience 10 times better. So the big takeaway from that is no matter what you think you're bad at, no matter what you think is fixed, and that includes personality traits. Personality traits are just a series of thoughts and behaviors, and those things can be changed too. So no matter what it is, you can become any type of speaker, any type of communicator that you want.
Man, that is great, Ty. So I think it, and I think everybody else does. You are probably more articulate than others. Is that by design?
Definitely by design. I'm naturally maybe a 1 out of 10 on the communication scale. So yeah, 100% it's by design. It just comes from practice. And so if we're talking about articulate, are you referring to the way that I'm saying the words or the words themselves?
The way you're saying them, the way that you pronounce your consonants, and you make sure you land on your vowels correctly. So the way you pronounce exactly as opposed to exactly, those sorts of
Can I,
things.
tell can I tell you a short story about how I learned about the power of pronouncing your words correctly?
Please.
So as I mentioned earlier, I used to teach piano to underprivileged kids. And one of the kids, his name was Noah. Okay. So I'd teach these particular kids in a very small room in an elementary school. So imagine a small room, not the best lit. It's bright enough, but it's kind of almost spooky dark. Not sure why it was. Only enough room in this particular little space for a piano and a piano bench. Now, I'm teaching Noah, and I believe we were pretty early at that point. He's learning a very basic C scale, right? So if you're not familiar with piano, it's where you just press each of the notes, the white keys, in a row. Anyone could do it. So Noah stopped in the middle and looked over at me, and he said, Ty, my brother said that if I keep playing the piano, I'm going to be a penis. So I stopped, and I'm trying to be a mature adult at this point and not laugh, but I usually fail at being a mature adult in those situations. And so I'm trying not to laugh, and I say, I'm sorry, Noah, a what? A penis, he says. A penis, a penis. So it takes a little bit of back and forth, and I learned that he's trying to say the word pianist. Pianist. And what is a pianist? It's a person who plays the piano. So whether his brother was playing a joke on him or not, the enunciation of the words, like pianist, for example, are very important. So if you're hearing me say exactly, that would be like the T in pianist, which I've never forgotten. And enunciation is something that is important with communication. Quick tip on this, just make sure that you're going slow enough so that you can enunciate all of your words properly, and make sure that you're opening your mouth enough. Because if your mouth's kind of closed like this, or if you're speaking too quickly, that's usually when your words can get a little bit jumbled.
That is really great advice. And I will tell you, the last Speakers Collaborative where I was on stage, I deployed, I think, 3 of Ty's pieces of wisdom, and all 3 worked like a charm. So, one of them, Ty, that we have spoken about a lot is speak to one, right? So, I get on stage and I say, who all here has done this? As opposed to, have you done this? And what that does is it makes every single person in the audience feel like the person in the spotlight is talking directly to them, as opposed to a general boring talk. So, Ty, I think one of the things that you bring to the table for the Speakers Collaborative is a really intense focus on delivering the best communication you can to whoever happens to be in the room. But I want to talk a little bit about Ty and move off of what it means to be a public speaker or a really good communicator. I want to know, kind of like, pull back the curtain, Ty. And so tell us a little bit, what are you reading these days?
I started reading Storyworthy by Matthew Dix, which is a book on storytelling. Admittedly, I haven't read it for the last 2 weeks. Has that ever happened to you? You start reading the book and then kind of just stop reading it for a while, and then somebody asks you what you're reading on a live conversation, and then you remember, right, I need to keep reading that book.
That's right. Yes. No. Yes. I'm there. Yeah. So tell me, what is it about that book that wants you to keep reading it as opposed to forgetting about it and moving on?
There's a lot of really actionable insights on storytelling. In particular, one that I like that he talks about is homework for life. Homework for life is every day you just spend 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the day and you write down a couple moments from the day, anything that could potentially turn into a future story. And one of the aha moments that I had reading the book was that some of his best stories came from really tiny moments. Little 5-second moments where you learn something, or you realize something, or you discover something. And a common misconception that I had forever was, well, these stories should be from these big moments, these grandiose things, things that on paper sound very exciting. But he talks about how if you write down the little moments from each day, and then maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks, kind of just read through them, think about, okay, is there a story I could make about this? What did I learn from this little moment? So I actually had started doing that as well up until I stopped reading it over the past 2 weeks. So I need to start doing homework for life again too. But that for me was really, really powerful because it's those little moments too that are often the most relatable, and the best stories are ones that the most amount of people can relate to.
Excellent. Stories for life. Is that what you said it was?
The book is called Story Worthy, and the
Storyworthy. Okay.
the technique is homework for life. So basically,
Got
the
it.
homework for life just means you're every day for life. Big commitment, I know. You're just writing down a couple moments from each day and then seeing what stories can come out of those.
That's really cool. All right. Now it's your turn. So I started the Speakers Collaborative a little over a year ago, building a stage for other people to get on. Do you have any questions for the host?
What would you say to a person who they've done a little bit of speaking at work, they've maybe given some presentations, or they've maybe spoken to clients in their business, but they don't feel like they have an idea that's worth sharing on a stage or a bigger platform. They're like, well, this has been talked about already. I don't know if this is really good enough. What would you say to that person who has that limiting belief holding them back?
I would start with the psychology behind those beliefs. Is your thought that it has been said by other people? Is that a thought you're giving yourself to talk yourself out of fulfilling your own dreams? So if you look at my talk at the last Speakers Collaborative, my first question was, have you ever been sitting in an audience wanting to be the person on stage? And if you have, then it doesn't matter what the excuse is to not get on stage. Nothing will ever satisfy you until you fulfill your call to share that story. Now, I will tell you, there are many stories that sound similar, but each and every one of them have a unique factor that only that storyteller brings to the table. So if you are sitting out there wanting to be on stage, wanting to tell your story, but you have a limiting factor in that everybody's already told this story, they haven't. You haven't told this story. And there is somebody that needs to hear this story that needs to hear it from you. I fully believe that there is a reason that you have the desire to tell this story. And I believe that reason is because somebody needs to hear you say it. No other reason. You need to be the one that says it. It could be said by 300 people, but until you say the words, it's not heard by that one person who needs to hear it.
I love that answer. That's powerful. I I think the fact that it's coming from a particular individual who has their own unique set of experiences that no one else has is in fact what makes it special and unique. And then if that's not enough, think about the world of fitness where there are 1 million people all saying work out more and eat less, and it's like a multi-billion-dollar industry with new fitness coaches coming up all the time who are all somehow, lots of them are getting the views, they're making money. So if you ever think that too many people talk about what you want to talk about, just look at fitness and you'll be like, okay, I can make this work.
Absolutely. Ty, it's funny you say it that way. If you boil it down, every story has been told. Every screenplay has been written. Every fitness guru is regurgitating what every fitness guru says. If that were the case, we would have no creativity these days because it's all been said. But that's not the case, because while it's all been said before, it hadn't been heard, and it hasn't been said by you. And I think that is the factor that everybody needs to take into account. It doesn't matter that Joe Blow 20 years ago said it. What matters is that today you say it. And if you've got that desire, you need to get on stage and say it because somebody needs to hear it.
I got chills when you said it's been said, but it hasn't been heard. That was good. That was really good, because you're right. Just because someone has said it doesn't mean that every single person has heard it, and maybe they need to hear it from somebody who looks like you, talks like you, and has had your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. For centuries, the same religious texts have been around, yet we continue to hear them differently depending on who's saying them. And I think, Ty, you're an expert in your field. There's a reason that I have included you in the Speakers Collaborative, because what you say matters. And the advice that you give to our speakers is important. But you're not the first person to say it. You're just the person we need to say it today. So we are actually at time. This has been a fantastic half hour. Ty, I'm going to give you the closing word. What is it that you want to tell our audience today?
I'm going to end with that powerful quote that you said. That's been ringing in my brain this whole time. It may have been said, but it hasn't been heard. So I encourage everyone, even if it's just taking the first step of speaking to your camera, pull out your phone, just get a little bit of practice in, get a little bit more comfortable with just the act of speaking with that type of platform. Just take the small steps. I know we all here take the small steps, but there's a reason, because it works. So I would say whip out your phone, do it by yourself, no pressure. Just start speaking to your phone. Start getting a little bit more comfortable. Start experimenting with topics you might want to talk about. And once you start, if you can just do a little bit more each day, eventually you'll be on Cody's stage and you'll have millions of fans.
Man, I appreciate that. All right, everybody. Thank you, Ty. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sure we're going to have you again. For those of you interested in the Speakers Collaborative, we have weekly sessions with our speakers. One of our guest experts to join us every time we meet is Ty. So not only do you get to hear him here in the live session, but we get to interact with him at the Speakers Collaborative. So Ty, thank you so much for coming. I hope to see you again really soon.
Appreciate you, Cody. This was a blast.
All right, man. Thank you. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for joining today. Remember, at the Speakers Collaborative, we built you a stage. You need to get on it. Have a great day.